In the following presentation, I will offer a critical comparison between artificial intelligence and human intelligence. I will explain why I think that the term simulated intelligence is a more accurate name for this phenomenon. In the process, I will demonstrate why machines don't think and brains don't compute. Finally, I will reflect on why understanding this difference can provide a valuable new perspective from which to view the mystery of conscious experience. Artificial intelligence can be compared to a mirror of human intelligence. A mirror receives data that is structured by contact with a fraction of the surface of a person and can reflect back this visual data with extremely high resolution and precision. But no part of the living process that is the source of that visible surface is provided to the mirror. The human source of the mirror image has spatial depth, materiality, and living animacy, which contribute to the capacity to recognize the precise similarity of the reflected image. But the mirror image has no depth or materiality or animacy, nothing but surface. So it is with current large language models. Current forms of artificial intelligence take advantage of a feature of formal inference that is as old as symbolic logic. The ability to specify the structure of inference irrespective of meaning. Thus, in one of the foundational texts in cognitive science, Newell and Simon point out that logic, and by incorporation all of mathematics, was a game played with meaningless tokens according to certain purely syntactic rules. All meaning had been purged. And in a recent discussion of finding ways to integrate meaningful symbolic understanding into artificial intelligence, researchers from DeepMind argue that, in purely syntactic systems, meaning must somehow propagate through meaning-agnostic syntactic reasoning processes. We mistakenly tend to think of computers as special, but in many respects, other than their programmability, they are not different from most other machines. Indeed, any machine can compute at least in a minimal sense. This is because computing is just assigning a symbolic interpretation to each of a set of distinct machine states that serve as tokens, and constraining the operation of the machine so that running the machine will traverse states in a way that parallels the operation of performing a formal operation or mental inference using those symbols. Once one understands this, it becomes clear that the concept of artificial intelligence is a misnomer. All that machines can do is simulate intelligence. This can be illustrated by considering other forms of simulation. Consider a highly accurate simulation of galaxy formation. Even though it might be able to accurately account for the way that billions of stars behave over billions of years, it nevertheless lacks mass, gravitation, nuclear fusion, movement, and space. Similarly, a large language model, an LLM, can produce remarkably interpretable responses to a user's queries. But it is hermetically insulated from the pragmatic contexts and meaningful purposes that structured the complex patterns of its input data. It only has access to the patterns exhibited by the language artifacts that were left as traces of these intentional processes. So even though an LLM is trained using a dataset data as large as all the text on the internet, its simulated sentence generation lacks any intrinsic meaning or purpose. But it can still be understood and be informative to an interpreter able to fill in the meaningful background of the processes that created the original training, data using one's own experience. In this respect, large language models are only fossils left behind by the meaning and use that provided structure to the texts they are trained on. Like fossils, they have inherited only a trace of the structure that was once part of a living process. But the living dynamics that gave rise to that structure is no longer present. The meaning and usefulness of the text that an LLM provides is nowhere located within the model. It is only provided by a person interpreting its output. The creation of text by LLMs is effectively a process of lossy compression that strips out all the real-world context of its creation, then subsequently removes all but the essential probabilities linking words. These losses are filled in by high-probability guesses to generate a string of words that is predicted to most likely to follow from a user's prompt, according to the modeled statistics. The resulting text is only meaningful to a user able to use lived experience to fill in likely meanings and purposes that were originally compressed out. To distinguish the kind of language model that is acquired by machine learning as compared to the kind of language knowledge that is acquired by human children, consider two obvious differences. To build up its language competence, an LLM is trained to minimize prediction errors. It generates a string of words that is consistent with what its statistical parameters predict should be most likely. In contrast, a child is not just trying to predict what word should come next. The child's choice of what words to produce is instead pragmatically driven. In other words, it is driven by a desire to accomplish some beneficial end, including affecting another's actions and attention. So language learning in humans is not word prediction and error correction. It is learning to generate words that are likely to affect the behavior of others. Success or failure to communicate about something is what provides the error correction that an infant uses to construct its knowledge of language. In the early stages of training, LLMs only produce gibberish that has no resemblance to even simple language. An LLM only begins to approximate interpretable words and sentences after millions of trial and error cycles using astronomically vast amounts of human texts. In comparison, children begin their development of language competence by producing simple words and sentences in appropriate contexts, despite being provided with comparatively little language data. Another perspective that can help to understand the architecture of an LLM's simulation of language is provided by considering how this same machine learning logic has been employed to analyze the three-dimensional folding structures of proteins. For decades, the protein folding problem was considered nearly intractable. Knowledge of the sequence of amino acids that makes up the protein backbone is only minimally informative about how it will fold. Despite understanding most of the physical-chemical properties involved, molecular biologists find it difficult to determine how they interact to produce a protein's structure. Surprisingly, the protein folding problem was effectively solved using the logic of LLM prediction. Given an arbitrary sequence of 20 letters, each standing for one of 20 amino acids, LLM-based systems have predicted thousands of protein folding configurations that turn out to be mostly accurate. This indicates that predicting protein folding based on sequences of amino acids is essentially the same as predicting syntactically and semantically appropriate sentences from sequences of words. Three slightly different LLM-based approaches, including AlphaFold, ProtGPT, and EMSFold, have been used to accurately predict protein folding patterns. But notice that these LLMs have not been provided with any information about the physical forces that generate the 3D folding of proteins. The predictions are only based on known correlations between amino acid sequences and protein shapes. It will require considerable biochemical research to use this correlational data to repredict the physical-chemical properties that are what ultimately produce these structures. But just knowing these correlations can assist biochemists in their search for the underlying mechanisms. It's a bit like looking in the back of a math textbook to find the answer to a math problem, in order to work backwards to figure out how to solve an equation. Correlation isn't cause, but it can provide useful clues about causes. As one of the authors of protein folding applications suggests, in linguistics, the distributional hypothesis proposes that meaning can be inferred from text by the way it constrains the patterns of words. An analogous idea has been critical for inference from sequences in biology. So, even though the LLM has no information about the chemistry and physics influencing protein folding, its model of the complex many-dimensional statistical correlations linking sequences to structures can be used to help discover them. So rather than being a parallel to human cognition, the simulation logic of this form of machine learning and prediction provides a potentially useful alternative to mental processes. Precisely because this form of simulated intelligence works in an almost inverted way to the way brains work, it has the potential to be a powerful complement to human thinking. It excels at what we find most difficult and unnatural. Even in the brief time that these tools have been available, they have already demonstrated their usefulness to both art and science. Because training is inevitably based on past communications, LLMs are unlikely to be a source of out-of-the-box insights. But this generative tool can provide a powerful exploratory guide and creative partner. For instance, this is a photorealistic birthday card that I created using the AI image generation software called DALL-E. I made it for a guitarist friend who has a Labradoodle puppy. In just a few seconds, it found ways to combine images that have probably never before been juxtaposed in this way. Now let's return to the mirror analogy to consider what this inverted reflection of thinking can tell us about living intelligence and actual thinking. First, it helps to exemplify a critical difference between the sorts of processes involved in the construction and operation of the devices we build, and the development and functioning of living organisms. In general terms, we can distinguish between what I would call engineering logic and organic logic. Engineering logic produces things by assembly. It is an accretion process. In this process, parts precede the whole. Assembly logic is determined by a pre-existing plan. Assembly is a step-by-step additive process. The parts are combined to make larger and larger complexes, and the final operation or function of the whole device becomes possible only after the assembly is completed. In contrast, organic logic follows an inverted order. Parts don't precede the whole, but differentiate out of an undifferentiated whole, which precedes the parts. Differentiation is a product of their interactions, not some outside imposition, and the operation and functioning of the whole is itself the cause of the process. This inverted logic is exemplified by the difference between the design and operation of computing machines and the organization and functioning of brains. Consider a Turing machine, as diagrammed on the left, and a cluster of neurons as depicted on the right. Ignore for the moment their material differences, and just consider how each operates. Turing machine operation involves the manipulates discrete data units, such as symbol tokens on a tape or in the states of available memory locations. What matters is the order of its operations. The time it takes to complete an operation is irrelevant. What matters is the order of operations. Although each discrete operation requires energy, the value, source, and amount of energy involved is unrelated to the computation that is performed. Each of these features is inverted when it comes to brains and nervous systems. Although neuronal output is in the form of energetic spikes propagated from neuron to neuron, it is the pattern of these spikes that matters, not simply their production. Neural information processes are not sequence-dependent. Signals are exchanged between neurons asynchronously. The rate and patterning of this signaling is critically important because relative synchrony determines functional difference. And finally, metabolism does not merely provide background operational support. Changes in metabolism can directly and indirectly influence neuronal activity and thereby contribute to their information content. The critical role of synchrony in brain function is a consequence of the way neurons respond to inputs from other neurons. A typical neuron receives signals from hundreds of other neurons via synaptic connections. Depending on where along a neuron's many branching dendrites these synaptic inputs are located, their effects will be different. This is because input stimulation is propagated along these branches toward the central soma at different rates. Signals originating at different points will only sum if they converge at the same point in time in the neuron. The receiving neuron will be induced to fire an output signal when the converging signals sum above some threshold. For a simple analogy, imagine a toilet with multiple flush handles that need to be pressed simultaneously or nearly so in order to flush the toilet. More importantly, there is a deep connection between mental experience and biological energy. Neuronal activity is thoroughly entangled with local metabolism. Brain functions evolve to regulate and maintain organism functions, including neuronal functions themselves. So mental self and somatic self are recursively self-preserving. In this respect, brain activity indirectly represents its own fragile material existence. But this relationship is fundamental in an even more thoroughgoing sense. Neuronal activity is in part caused by local metabolism. This is because changes in neural activity depend on the amount of oxygen and glucose that is consumed. The relationship between neural activity and metabolism is complex. Metabolism can vary considerably in different brain regions, and differences in regional metabolism can significantly affect patterns of neural activity. As a result, neuronal information processes are modulated by both the temporal pattern of local synaptic inputs and by changes in local oxygen and glucose metabolism. Each effect is regulated by inputs from diverse brain regions and facilitated by distinct mechanisms. This can help to explain the reason that we feel mental effort, such as when trying to identify an unfamiliar stimulus or solve a difficult conceptual problem. It is not just that neurological information processes are carried out by living biological structures. The distinction between information and energy within brains and bodies is blurred. It is because metabolism can both provide background support for neural activity and also directly modulate a neuron's intrinsic signal processing tendencies. On the one hand, increased stimulation from other neurons can induce a neuron to produce output activity that exceeds available energy. The resulting neuronal energy deficit will recruit increased local blood flow to restore this deficit. On the other hand, if energy supply is independently increased or decreased, irrespective of extrinsic stimulation, neural activity will increase or decrease in response, respectively. I hypothesize that it is the degree of discordance between energetic support and neural signaling processes that determines the form and intensity of mental experience. This suggests that our conscious experience of mental effort or disturbance is a function of how far neural energetic and signal generation processes are out of equilibrium with respect to each other. But how is local metabolism regulated out of sync with local neural activity? Changes in the distribution of oxygen and glucose to different areas of the cerebral cortex is mediated by a loop of connections from cerebral cortex to basal forebrain, nuclei to brainstem nuclei, and back to the cortex. Basal forebrain nuclei, such as the nucleus accumbens and amygdala of the limbic system, assign a plus or minus valence to cortical information and send this assignment to monoaminergic nuclei in the midbrain and brainstem. The neurons in these brainstem nuclei send their outputs to all areas of the cerebral cortex, where they regulate the distribution of local blood flow and synaptic plasticity. This co-institutes a recursive loop whereby cortical activity in one cortical area can indirectly modulate the metabolic support for cortical activity areas. The result is a strange loop that inextricably entangles mental processes with metabolic processes, because the brainstem nuclei that form one link in this reciprocal loop of connections also receive visceral information about the state of the body. This enables bodily needs to bias the way that cortical systems respond to sensory information. This explains why a local increase in the intensity of the fMRI signal correlates with an increase in the experience of mental effort to perform mental tasks associated with that region. In this way, fMRI tracks the location in the brain where conscious attention and the experience of mental effort are being generated. Conscious experience is in this way a function of the extent to which information processing and its material energetic medium are out of equilibrium with respect to one another. This interdependency between information and its physicality is, of course, entirely missing from machine-based information processes. So paying attention to this difference between AI and natural intelligence can provide insight concerning the nature of conscious experience. It not only helps us understand why machines can only simulate intelligence, but not actually think. It may also provide insight in how to more effectively design AI systems to augment human intelligence. Unlike natural intelligence, that necessarily involves its own physicality, the states that simulate information in a machine are entirely insulated from the world that gives them pattern. So the patterns of data they manipulate have nothing to do with their own physical existence. As a result, there is nothing that it's like to be a machine. Once we recognize this inescapable entanglement between information and its physicality in natural intelligence, dualism dissolves. Perhaps it's finally time to abandon Descartes. I think, therefore I am, and replace it with I feel, therefore I'm real. As a postscript, I'd like to direct your attention to an insightful website made available by the New York Times. It provides an easy-to-understand example of the way that an LLM learns to simulate language. You can observe its progress as it is trained on one of 6 different data sets, including the complete works of Shakespeare, which is approximately 900,000 words in length. The LLM is called NanoGPT and is a sort of baby LLM. Thank you for your attention.